Alright, adjusting the chain, something that's going to make it easier, getting it up on the center stand. This is not necessary, but it helps and makes the whole thing easier. First thing you're going to do is remove the cotter pin or R-clip, whatever you've got inside here. You're going to use a 22mm to loosen the rear axle, and just as a reference, that's about 76 foot-pounds when you retighten it. You're going to need a 12mm and a 10mm to adjust the chain thing here. You're going to want yourself some chain lube because you might as well lube the chain at the same time while you're at it. And of course, we've got some, this is the cheap way to lube your chain. It's even got a picture of a motorcycle on there. I got this from Walmart for like $3 or $4 a can. If I go to my local motorcycle shop, they want something like $12 to $15 for a can of chain grease. So I would recommend not paying that much. You're going to need some sort of measuring device, like a tape measure is useful. And also, this is a different kind of depth gauge, which I use. And so you're going to want to loosen your rear axle, just break it free at least. Or you can do that a little bit after you check the chain tension. You're going to check the chain tension right here in the middle. I'm going to grab a rag. And you're going to grab it basically between the front and the rear sprocket. As you can see, this is really loose because I've just been working on this. And the amount that you want this to move up and down is about 20mm, give or take, depending on your setup. And what you're going to do is after you loosen this axle, you're going to use these chain adjusters here to push or to basically set the wheel up. And this is also the alignment adjusters, and it's going to adjust the tension in the chain. So when you work on one, the left, you want to do the same amount of change to the right. And I'm going to show you how to measure the difference between the two to make sure they're the same. Okay, so you're checking your tension here. What I usually do is just stand up a tape measure like so, and I kind of move the chain up and down right next to that to get an idea how much slack is there. Then I'll make an adjustment here at the rear, and then I'll recheck it over here a few times until I find the range or the tension that I'm happy with. When you want to adjust the chain, the alignment adjusters or chain tension adjusters, first you've got to break loose this 12mm guy right here. Okay, this is already pre-loosened, but you just break that loose, free it up a little bit. And if you want to tighten the chain, you want to turn this one in. So you would simply tighten this one here, and you'll probably need a wrench to do this. And as this goes in, it's going to push the rear wheel out, and this is going to tighten the chain. If you want to loosen the chain, what you'd do is you'd actually turn this outward, loosen it so that this bolt is coming this way. And at the same time, you're probably going to want a mallet or something like that to bang on the back of this tire to make sure you push the wheel in as far as it can go, so that everything is tight. Otherwise, it will be loose and out of alignment. So every time you make an adjustment, when you especially loosen or even when you're tightening, I like to give the tire a good whack from the rear here with a mallet or with my hand or leg or anything, just to make sure that everything is tight up against the axle, because these things can get loose when you do that. Okay, once you've got your chain tension to where you want it, what you want to do is make sure you bang on that rear tire to make sure everything's seated in correctly. You want to make sure these bolts are actually up against the swing arm, and there's a little recess in the swing arm. It's like a little divot, and the head of this bolt actually sits in that divot. And that's the same on both sides. Once you've got the chain where you want it, and now you want to double check to make sure your length is correct or your alignment's correct, what I do is I use a little depth gauge like this, and I measure from the same distance like so on both sides. So I'm measuring the length of this bolt. Oftentimes they'll tell you to measure these little hash marks on the swing arm, but these are very inaccurate, and I've had good results over the time I've been riding by doing this. And I'll measure the length of the adjuster bolt, and so I'll do that on both sides. When you're happy with where you are, you need to get your 12mm to tighten this nut here, but at the same time you want to make sure that this one doesn't spin at all. So you use a second wrench to hold this one steady, and you tighten this one. So I'm not gonna do that because I gotta hold the camera, but okay, so you wanna hold this nut steady and you wanna tighten that one just until it's pretty snug up against the alignment bracket thing here. And then once that's done, all you do is you torque up your rear axle. Some bikes can be a little more troublesome. Sometimes when you're torquing the rear axle, that can actually cause the wheel to move a little bit out of alignment. So on bikes where that was more of a difficulty, what I would do is I would have somebody else push up against the back of the tire, pushing that way so that it doesn't move at all, and then I'll torque it down a little bit. I was able to do that myself too by without anyone around, by torquing just a little bit and then banging against the back of this tire with a mallet. And I just give it a couple good whacks to make sure it's actually seated in properly. But depending on your make and model, that could be an issue. It has been for some motorcycles for me. But you want to make sure everything's seated tightly up against the swing arm, and you can tell because that bolt will be seated in its little divot there. If you mess that up, then your alignment will be screwed up. But this alignment technique has worked for me. And that's about it for this job. I think that'll do it. Let's also not forget to 76 foot-pounds, I believe, give or take, on the rear axle for torque. And always put your cotter pin back in whenever you remove the wheel. Or you can go to I went to like a stainless R-clip because I do a lot of maintenance and I'm taking the wheels off constantly, so I don't use the disposable type. The disposable type are fine, but they're disposable, so don't reuse those normal cotter pins. Once they get bent, they're no good. You bend them once to get them on, and after that you just throw them away. I usually just cut them off to make sure that nobody gets confused about that.